Man, just fuck all that shit, right? I'm going to the fucking army. That's all there is to say.
You think about doing what? Man, what are you, a damn fool?
Listen, man, they say I can learn how to work on computers and stuff. Plus, they give me money for college.
Before Oscar winners, Hollywood legends, and real-life tragedy, there was one film that changed everything. When Boyz n the Hood premiered in July 1991, 23-year-old John Singleton transformed his experiences growing up in South-Central Los Angeles into a groundbreaking story of violence, family, hope, and survival. The film earned him Academy Award nominations for Best Original Screenplay and Best Director, making him the youngest person ever nominated for Best Director and the first African-American to receive that honor. But its greatest legacy wasn't just the movie. It was the cast, whose real lives would become almost as unforgettable as the story itself. Today, we'll unveil what became of the Boyz n the Hood cast and where they are today after all those years. Let's get right to it. Cuba Gooding Jr. At just 23 years old, Cuba Gooding Jr. walked into the audition carrying the same youthful confidence and vulnerability that Singleton envisioned for Jason Tree Styles, a teenager trying to escape the violence surrounding him in South-Central Los Angeles. Singleton, who had grown up in the very neighborhoods portrayed in the film, wanted authenticity above all else. Trey became the audience's eyes and conscience, a young man torn between two worlds, but guided by the unwavering principles of his father, Furious Styles. When Boyz n the Hood premiered in July 1991, Gooding was transformed from a relatively unknown actor into one of Hollywood's brightest young talents. It was the beginning of a remarkable rise that seemed destined to have a perfect Hollywood ending. That momentum only accelerated throughout the 1990s. Gooding delivered memorable performances in films including A Few Good Men, Outbreak, and As Good as It Gets. But everything changed in March 1997. When he stole nearly every scene in Jerry Maguire, his exuberant portrayal of football player Rod Tidwell earned him the Academy Award for Best Supporting Actor, and his unforgettable acceptance speech instantly became part of Oscar history. Suddenly, Cuba Gooding Jr. was an Academy Award winner, commanding leading roles in films such as Men of Honor, Pearl Harbor, and Radio. Looking back, those years now represent the undisputed peak of his career, when few could have imagined that his greatest challenges would come long after the cameras stopped rolling. The turning point arrived nearly 3 decades after Boyz n the Hood. Beginning in June 2019, multiple women accused Gooding of inappropriate touching during encounters at New York City nightclubs. As investigators continued examining additional complaints, the allegations dominated headlines and cast a long shadow over his once celebrated career. Gooding consistently denied wrongdoing, but the legal proceedings continued for several years. Then, in April 2022, he pleaded guilty to 1 misdemeanor count of misbehaving with a woman. The plea agreement required counseling and allowed him to avoid jail if he complied with its conditions. A separate civil lawsuit alleging assault was settled out of court in June 2023. By 2026, Cuba Gooding Jr. continues acting, although the spotlight surrounding him has changed dramatically. Instead of being remembered solely as the hopeful young man who played Trey Styles, conversations about his legacy now often include the legal controversies that reshaped his public image. As remarkable as his rise and fall has been, another member of the Boyz n the Hood cast would ultimately experience a fate even more shocking. We're only getting started here. Ice Cube. Long before audiences watched him portray the hardened gang member with heartbreaking honesty in Boyz n the Hood, Ice Cube had already become one of rap music's most influential voices. Born O'Shea Jackson Sr., he helped found NWA, the groundbreaking group whose raw depiction of life in South-Central Los Angeles transformed hip-hop forever. After leaving NWA in late 1989 over financial disputes with manager Jerry Heller, many assumed his next battle would remain in music. Instead, a young filmmaker named John Singleton saw something different. Singleton insisted on casting people who understood the streets they were portraying believing authenticity mattered more than polished acting experience. Despite having never appeared in a feature film, Ice Cube landed the role of Doughboy at just 21 years old. The performance felt so natural that many believed he was simply playing himself. When Boyz and the Hood premiered in July 1991, Doughboy instantly became one of the film's most unforgettable characters. His closing monologue, reflecting on how the media ignored violence in black communities, remains one of the most quoted scenes in modern American cinema. Critics praised Ice Cube's surprisingly nuanced performance, earning him a nomination from the Chicago Film Critics Association for Most Promising Actor. More importantly, Hollywood suddenly realized the rapper possessed genuine screen presence. Rather than returning exclusively to music, he began carefully building an acting career that balanced dramatic roles with comedy. Unlike many musicians whose film careers faded after one success, Ice Cube proved remarkably selective. His greatest breakthrough came not in front of the camera, but behind it. In 1995, Ice Cube co-wrote and starred in Friday, a modestly budgeted comedy that became a cultural phenomenon and launched a franchise. He followed that success with films including Barbershop, Are We There Yet?, and Ride Along, while increasingly serving as a writer, producer, and creative force behind his own projects. Instead of depending on Hollywood studios, he built businesses that allowed him to control his work. In 2017, he co-founded the Big Three Professional Basketball League, creating a successful 3-on-3 competition featuring former NBA players. It was another example of his willingness to invest in ideas others initially dismissed. Perhaps even more remarkable is how dramatically Ice Cube's personal life diverged from Doughboy's fictional fate. While Doughboy's story ends in violence, just weeks after losing his brother Ricky, Ice Cube married Kimberly Woodruff in April 1992, and their marriage has endured for more than 3 decades. Together, they raised 4 children while avoiding the scandals that often follow celebrity families. His career likewise expanded into entrepreneurship, production, music, sports, and philanthropy. Morris Chestnut. When Morris Chestnut arrived to audition for Boyz n the Hood, he was a relatively unknown actor with only a handful of television credits. Director John Singleton was searching for someone who could make audiences instantly believe in Ricky Baker, a gifted high school football player whose dream of earning a college scholarship represented one of the few paths out of South Central Los Angeles. Chestnut, just 22 years old during filming, possessed the quiet confidence and natural athleticism Singleton envisioned. Although it was his feature film debut, his performance carried an emotional authenticity that made Ricky more than just another character. He became the embodiment of lost potential, a young man whose future seemed within reach until a split-second decision changed everything. Few first-time actors have ever left such a lasting impression with so little screen time. That impression reached its devastating peak during one of the most unforgettable scenes in American film history. After a neighborhood confrontation escalates into a pursuit through the streets, Ricky is struck by gunfire while desperately trying to escape. Singleton deliberately avoided sensationalizing the violence, instead focusing on the terrifying randomness of the moment and the grief that followed. Chestnut used the film as the foundation for one of Hollywood's most consistent careers. Throughout the 1990s and early 2000s, he steadily expanded his resume with leading roles in films, including The Best Man, The Brothers, Two Can Play That Game, and Like Mike. Unlike many actors whose early success faded, Chestnut reinvented himself across multiple generations, balancing romantic dramas, thrillers, action films, and television. His return as Lance Sullivan in The Best Man sequels and the streaming series The Best Man, the final chapters introduced him to an entirely new audience, while starring roles in network dramas demonstrated his remarkable longevity. In 2022, Hollywood formally recognized those decades of achievement when Chestnut received a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame. Away from the cameras, Chestnut's life has been strikingly different from Ricky Baker's heartbreaking story. In 1995, he married Pam Bice, and together they built one of Hollywood's most enduring marriages while raising 2 children largely outside the spotlight. Moving on, Lawrence Fishburne. Unlike many of his younger co-stars, Lawrence Fishburne had spent nearly 2 decades building an extraordinary resume. He famously lied about his age at just 14 years old to secure a role in Francis Ford Coppola's Apocalypse Now, claiming he was older so he could portray teenage soldier Tyrone "Clean" Miller. The gamble worked, although filming stretched over several chaotic years in the Philippines, meaning Fishburne actually reached adulthood before production finally wrapped. Years before Boyz and the Hood entered production, an ambitious young production assistant named John Singleton crossed paths with Fishburne while working security and production jobs around Hollywood, including on the set of Pee-wee's Playhouse, where Fishburne played the cheerful cowboy Curtis. Singleton told the established actor he was writing a screenplay and promised that one day he would cast him in the lead. It sounded like an impossible dream from an unknown filmmaker. Yet Singleton never forgot that promise. When Columbia Pictures approved Boyz and the Hood, Fishburne became his first choice to portray Furious Styles, Trey's disciplined father, and the moral compass of the story. Rather than portraying masculinity through violence or intimidation, Furious taught responsibility, education, and accountability, delivering unforgettable speeches about fatherhood, community, and systemic inequality. Decades later, many critics still regard him as one of the greatest fathers ever portrayed in American cinema. The success of Boyz and the Hood became another milestone in a career already filled with remarkable performances. Just 2 years later, Fishburne earned an Academy Award nomination for Best Actor for portraying Ike Turner in What's Love Got to Do with It? Then, in 1999, he cemented his place in film history as Morpheus in The Matrix. The role transformed him into an international star and showcased his ability to balance philosophical dialogue with unforgettable action sequences. Beyond film, Fishburne built an unusually diverse career across television and theater, winning Emmy Awards for projects including Miss Evers's Boys and Tribeca, while earning a Tony Award for his performance in 2 Trains Running. Even as Hollywood evolved through streaming platforms and blockbuster franchises, Fishburne remained remarkably relevant. He returned to the John Wick universe as the Bowery King, continued producing acclaimed television projects, and earned praise for consistently choosing complex, character-driven roles rather than chasing trends. Throughout more than 5 decades in the entertainment industry, his reputation has remained rooted in professionalism, intelligence, and artistic integrity. It is a fitting contrast to Furious Styles himself, a man whose greatest strength was guiding others toward a better future. Fishburne's own career has reflected that same steady wisdom. Angela Bassett, Regina King, and Nia Long. Their screen time was limited. Their impact on Hollywood was anything but. When Boyz and the Hood premiered in July 1991, audiences were captivated by the performances of Cuba Gooding Jr., Ice Cube, and Morris Chestnut. Yet quietly working around them were 3 actresses whose futures would prove just as extraordinary. None of them were the film's biggest stars in 1991. Boyz and the Hood unintentionally assembled 3 future Hollywood icons long before the industry fully realized what it had. For Angela Bassett, Boyz and the Hood arrived at the perfect moment. A graduate of the Yale School of Drama, alongside future husband Courtney B. Vance, Bassett had spent years building her resume through theater and small television roles while waiting for the breakthrough that never seemed to arrive. Her performance as Reva Stiles revealed a quiet authority that immediately caught Hollywood's attention. Just 2 years later, she stunned audiences by portraying Tina Turner in What's Love Got to Do with It, performing many of Turner's demanding stage routines herself after months of intense physical training. The role earned Bassett an Academy Award nomination, a Golden Globe victory, and instantly established her among Hollywood's elite. Rather than fading after one iconic performance, she continued building an extraordinary career spanning more than 4 decades, winning multiple Emmy Awards and Golden Globes before making history in 2023 as the first actor ever nominated for an Academy Award for portraying a Marvel character through her performance as Queen Ramonda in Black Panther: Wakanda Forever. Off-screen, her nearly 3-decade marriage to Courtney B. Vance has become one of Hollywood's strongest and most admired relationships. Regina King's rise was even more surprising. Already familiar to television audiences from the sitcom 227, Boyz and the Hood marked her first appearance in a feature film, quietly launching one of the most celebrated careers of the modern era. Over the following decades, she earned a reputation for disappearing completely into every role, winning 4 Primetime Emmy Awards before capturing the Academy Award for Best Supporting Actress for If Beale Street Could Talk. Refusing to remain in front of the camera alone, King expanded into directing, earning widespread acclaim for One Night in Miami. Then, in January 2022, Regina King's life was shattered. Her only son, Ian Alexander Jr., unalived himself just days after celebrating his 26th birthday. King and her former husband, Ian Alexander Sr., released a brief statement describing Ian as such a bright light who cared so deeply about the happiness of others, adding that their family was devastated by the loss. Hollywood responded with an outpouring of support as friends, co-stars, and fellow filmmakers mourned alongside her. King stepped away from public life, canceling appearances and focusing entirely on her family. For months, she remained largely silent. When she finally spoke publicly again, King chose not to hide behind carefully rehearsed answers. Instead, she described grief as something that changes rather than disappears. In interviews, she explained that she still introduces herself as Ian's mother because, in her words, motherhood does not end with death. She has spoken about allowing herself to feel joy without guilt, while also accepting that grief arrives in unexpected waves, often when least anticipated. Rather than trying to move on, King has said she is learning to move forward while carrying her son's memory with her every day. Nia Long's journey, meanwhile, unfolded differently but proved equally influential. Following Boyz and the Hood, she became one of the defining faces of 1990s black cinema through films including Love Jones, Soul Food, The Best Man, and Big Mama's House, while simultaneously becoming a television favorite through The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, Third Watch, and later NCIS Los Angeles. Admired for balancing romance, comedy, and drama without ever losing her authenticity, Long remained a leading actress for more than 3 decades. Then, in September 2022, her private life unexpectedly became international headlines after her longtime partner, Boston Celtics head coach Ime Udoka, was suspended for an inappropriate workplace relationship. The public scandal ended their long relationship, yet Long refused to let the controversy define her, instead focusing on protecting her family and co-parenting their son. Looking back, it is remarkable that 3 women with relatively modest roles in Boyz and the Hood would ultimately become 3 of its greatest success stories. Each faced different obstacles, each found different victories, and each proved that true resilience is measured not simply by fame, but by the ability to keep moving forward when life changes without warning. Not every member of the Boyz and the Hood cast found lasting success in Hollywood. Some found something even more meaningful: Reggie Green. Audiences remember Reggie Green as Lil Chris, the young man confined to a wheelchair after a drive-by shooting. But what many never realized is that the role echoed his own life with unsettling accuracy. Long before director John Singleton cast him, Green had experienced the kind of tragedy Singleton wanted America to confront. At just 6 years old, while growing up in Richmond, California, Green was caught in the crossfire of an argument between 2 neighbors. A stray bullet struck him in the back, severing his spinal cord and leaving him permanently paralyzed from the waist down. Then, as if that devastating injury were not enough, another heartbreaking blow followed within hours. His father died from an overdose of a controlled substance the very same day. For many children, such circumstances would have defined the rest of their lives. Green later spoke candidly about struggling with insecurity and wondering whether he would ever be accepted again. Suddenly confined to a wheelchair, he watched childhood friendships change and learned how quickly society underestimated people with disabilities. Yet those difficult years also forged an extraordinary determination. Rather than allowing isolation to consume him, Green began exploring opportunities that would place him in front of audiences instead of hiding from them. Acting became both an escape and a challenge. It allowed him to portray characters whose disabilities were only one part of their identity, quietly pushing back against Hollywood stereotypes that often reduced wheelchair users to background roles or objects of pity. That determination led him to Boyz n the Hood when he was still a teenager. Singleton believed Green's lived experience would bring authenticity to Lil Chris, a young victim of neighborhood violence whose future had been permanently altered. Although his screen time was brief, the performance carried emotional weight because Green did not have to imagine the frustration, resilience, or quiet dignity of living with paralysis. Behind the scenes, he also made history by becoming the first African-American actor living with paralysis to join the Screen Actors Guild. While the milestone received relatively little national attention at the time, it represented a significant breakthrough in the industry. As the years passed, Green gradually shifted his focus away from acting and toward community leadership. Instead of pursuing celebrity, he dedicated himself to motivational speaking and mentoring young people facing adversity. Through the nonprofit organization Empowering Youth, he visited schools, community centers, and youth programs, encouraging children to reject violence and believe their circumstances did not have to determine their futures. His own life became the proof. The supporting cast who quietly found peace. The supporting cast of Boyz n the Hood may not have received top billing, but many of them quietly built lives every bit as compelling as the film itself. While some of their co-stars became Oscar winners or found themselves at the center of public controversy, others chose a different path. Tyra Farrell, whose portrayal of Brenda Baker brought remarkable emotional depth to the film, is a good example in this regard. Although only a few years older than the actors playing her sons, Morris Chestnut and Ice Cube, Farrell convincingly embodied a weary single mother struggling to hold her fractured family together. Critics praised her performance, earning her an NAACP Image Award nomination and opening the door to roles in films such as White Men Can't Jump and Poetic Justice. Throughout the 1990s and 2000s, she became a familiar face on television through series including ER, The Shield, and Law and Order, Special Victims Unit. Rather than chasing celebrity, Farrell gradually devoted increasing attention to advocacy, lending her voice to initiatives supporting criminal justice reform and courtroom accountability. A similar quiet determination shaped the life of Alicia Rogers, who portrayed Shanice, Ricky Baker's teenage girlfriend. Although her role was relatively small, audiences never forgot her heartbreaking grief after Ricky's death, one of the film's most emotionally devastating moments. Rogers followed the film with appearances in Class Act and several independent productions before making an unexpected decision. Instead of pursuing Hollywood full-time, she stepped away from acting to raise her daughter as a single mother. For nearly 2 decades, family came before fame. During those years, Rogers became a motivational speaker, visiting schools and youth organizations to encourage young people to avoid violence and believe in their own potential. Only after her daughter reached adulthood did Rogers return to filmmaking. 2 other cast members followed equally different paths. Desi Arnaz Hines II, who memorably portrayed young Trey Styles, continued acting through the 1990s before quietly leaving the entertainment industry altogether. Unlike many former child stars, he chose an intensely private life, rarely granting interviews or making public appearances. Meanwhile, Raymond D. Turner, remembered as the intimidating gang member Ferris, experienced a remarkable personal transformation after leaving acting. Relocating to Las Vegas, he founded a marketing company, became a devoted Christian, and mentored aspiring entrepreneurs. He passed away in February 2024 at the age of 63. This next one, though, Hollywood believed he'd be the next breakout star. But fate had other plans. Dedrick D. Gobert. When audiences first met Dedrick D. Gobert in Boyz n the Hood, he played Dookie, one of Doughboy's closest friends. At first glance, Dookie seemed like comic relief, instantly recognizable by the pacifier he constantly kept in his mouth. Yet that unusual character choice quickly became one of the film's most memorable visual trademarks, with many fans later crediting the look as an influence on a youth fashion trend that spread during the early 1990s. Gobert was only 19 years old during filming, but his natural screen presence caught the attention of director John Singleton and industry insiders alike. Unlike many supporting actors who disappeared after a successful debut, Gobert appeared poised for something much bigger. Hollywood had discovered a charismatic young performer with effortless authenticity, and producers were already lining up new opportunities before Boyz and the Hood had fully cemented its legacy. That momentum accelerated almost immediately. Singleton cast Gobert again in Poetic Justice alongside Janet Jackson and Tupac Shakur, reaffirming the confidence he had in the young actor's potential. Around the same time, Gobert appeared in the influential crime drama Menace to Society, another defining portrait of urban America that reinforced his growing reputation as one of the most convincing young actors of his generation. Friends and colleagues described him as personable, energetic, and eager to prove he could move beyond neighborhood characters into broader dramatic roles. By late 1994, his career appeared to be following the same upward trajectory as several of his Boyz and the Hood castmates. Singleton had even cast him in Higher Learning, a film exploring race, identity, and violence on a college campus. Few could have imagined what came next. Everything unraveled on the night of November 19, 1994, in the community of Mira Loma, California. What began as another gathering of Southern California's street racing scene quickly spiraled into deadly violence. Hundreds of spectators had gathered to watch illegal races when an argument erupted between rival groups in the crowd. In an instant, shouting gave way to panic, and then the unmistakable sound of gunfire. As people scattered in every direction, bullets tore through the crowd. Dedrick D. Gobert was struck multiple times. He collapsed at the scene. Another young man, 21-year-old Victor Rios, was also fatally shot. Gobert's girlfriend, Stephanie, suffered a devastating gunshot wound to the neck. She survived, but the injury left her permanently paralyzed. Gobert died just 6 days before what would have been his 23rd birthday. The timing was especially heartbreaking because his Hollywood career had never looked brighter. Investigators eventually identified Sonny Enrique as the gunman. He was convicted of 2 counts of first-degree murder, along with additional charges, and was initially sentenced to death. Years later, after California's death penalty system underwent major legal changes and capital punishment sentences were reevaluated, Enrique's sentence was converted to life imprisonment without parole. When Higher Learning premiered in January 1995, John Singleton dedicated the film to Gobert's memory, a quiet but deeply personal tribute to an actor he believed had extraordinary promise. Ice Cube would later remember Gobert as a good kid who got caught up in bad things, a simple reflection that captured the heartbreaking complexity of his fate. There is a painful irony woven throughout his story. Boyz and the Hood was created as a warning about how violence could destroy young lives before they ever reached their potential. Tragically, one of its own rising stars became another victim of the very cycle the film fought so hard to expose. But as devastating as Gobert's death was, the darkest real-life story connected to the cast was still waiting to unfold. Lloyd Avery II. In Boyz, the Hood, he committed the movie's most shocking murder. Real life became even darker. Most audiences never learned his name. Lloyd Avery II appeared only briefly as Knucklehead Number 2, the silent gang member who pulled the trigger that killed Ricky Baker in one of the most unforgettable scenes in American cinema. The role lasted only moments, yet it became permanently etched into the memories of millions of viewers. Avery was just 21 years old during filming, and although his performance contained almost no dialogue, his cold expression made the murder feel terrifyingly real. Ironically, the young actor who portrayed one of cinema's most infamous killers seemed poised for a promising future. But unlike many of his castmates, Avery struggled to establish himself in Hollywood after the film. Acting opportunities became increasingly scarce, and over the following years he drifted back toward the gang culture that Boyz and the Hood had warned about. The turning point came on July 1, 1999. On July 1st, Avery and his associate, Kevin Roby, targeted 2 men during what investigators later described as a robbery in South Los Angeles. The victims, Kenneth Atkins and Brian Reeves, were not gang rivals or intended targets in an ongoing feud. Prosecutors argued they were ordinary men caught in a senseless act of violence. During the robbery, both victims were shot and killed. Detectives from the Los Angeles Police Department launched an intensive investigation, interviewing witnesses and piecing together evidence that quickly led them to Avery and Roby. Both men were arrested, charged with 2 counts of first-degree murder, and faced the possibility of spending the rest of their lives behind bars. But the story does not end here. While incarcerated at Pelican Bay State Prison, Avery experienced a profound religious conversion, embracing Christianity with remarkable intensity. Fellow inmates nicknamed him Baby Jesus because of his outspoken faith and his efforts to encourage others to study the Bible. Prison correspondents later revealed that Avery believed God had given him a new purpose. In one letter to a prison chaplain, he expressed hope that he could help transform even the most hardened inmates through faith. That conviction led to one of the most chilling chapters of his life. Avery was assigned to share a cell with Kevin Roby, a multiple murderer who openly described himself as a Satanist. According to later accounts, Avery believed their pairing was no coincidence and saw it as an opportunity to lead Roby toward Christianity rather than fear him. Instead, the situation ended in horrifying violence. On the night of September 4, 2005, following repeated arguments centered on religion, Roby strangled Avery inside their shared cell. Investigators later determined that Avery's body remained undiscovered for 38 hours, making the circumstances even more disturbing. Over the years, sensational internet stories have repeatedly claimed Avery was sacrificed to Satan. Tragic, isn't it? The young actor, forever remembered for committing a fictional murder, became a convicted double murderer before dying violently himself behind prison walls. More than any other member of the Boyz in the Hood cast, Lloyd Avery II became the film's most haunting reminder that, sometimes, real life can become even darker than fiction. Well, that's it for now. Thanks for watching. Did you like this video? If you did, please consider liking, dropping a comment, and hitting the subscribe button so that you don't miss out on our new uploads. Also, don't miss this video you see on your screen right now. It's truly unbelievable.